Welcome to Stillwater Chronicles. Tonight, we settle into a story about a phone call that should not have been possible. There is a particular quality to silence at 4 in the morning. It is not the silence of an empty room or the silence between songs. It is a silence with weight, a silence that has been sitting there for hours, undisturbed, and has grown comfortable in its own presence. The kind of silence that notices when you enter it. Priya knew this silence well. She had worked the night dispatch for 11 years, and she had learned that the hours between 3 and 5 carried a different texture than the rest. The calls that came in during the day, urgent, overlapping, full of the noise of living, gave way by that hour to something slower, something that felt less like emergency and more like the world whispering its confessions. The operations center was never fully dark. Banks of monitors cast their cool blue light across rows of consoles. The ceiling panels hummed softly overhead. Not a loud hum, but the kind you feel more than hear. A low frequency that settles into the base of your skull after enough hours. The floor was gray, industrial carpet, worn smooth by shift changes and rolling chairs. Somewhere near the back of the room, a coffee machine clicked and exhaled. Priya had her headset on. She always had her headset on. Her console showed 3 active units on patrol, 2 reports being typed up, and the quiet amber glow of a system waiting to be needed. She had a cup of tea going cold to her right. She had a pen she kept clicking, slowly, without thinking. She had the hum and the blue light and the silence of 4:09 a.m. And she was content in the way that people become content when they have made peace with the hours the rest of the world sleeps through. At 4:10, the call came in. The tone in her headset, 3 descending notes, soft but precise, was the same tone she had heard thousands of times. Her hand moved to the console before her mind caught up. A number appeared on her screen. A landline. Something in the prefix told her it was old. The kind of exchange that belonged to a city that had half changed around it. She opened the line. Emergency. Which service do you require? There was a pause. Not the pause of someone deciding what to say, but a pause with texture. A pause that had breathing in it. Small breathing. Close to the receiver. Then, a child's voice. It was a girl, she thought, though something in the quality of it made her uncertain. The voice was not panicked. It was not screaming. It was the voice of a child who had been crying for a long time and had reached the stage beyond crying. Flat, exhausted, still pressing on. They're in the house, the voice said. Can you tell me your address? Priya asked, keeping her tone the way she had been trained. Calm, measured, present. The child gave a street name, a house number. Priya typed it. Are you safe right now? Can you get to a door? But the child did not seem to hear the question, or perhaps she had heard it and the answer didn't apply. She repeated herself in that same flat, exhausted tone. They're in the house. Priya dispatched a unit. 2 officers, Davidson and Reyes, in a patrol car 4 minutes away. She kept the line open and continued to speak, as protocol required, asking the child to stay on the line, asking if she was hurt, asking if she could see a window or a door. The child said nothing else. but she stayed on the line. Priya could hear her breathing, shallow and slow, like someone sleeping with their eyes open. And she kept talking, filling the silence with her calm voice, and waited for Davidson and Reyes to arrive. They pulled up at 4:17 a.m. Priya heard Davidson's voice in her other ear, the radio channel running parallel, describing what he saw. A terraced house on the edge of what had once been a residential street. Most of the neighboring properties were boarded. The house itself had no lights on. The garden at the front was overgrown, not the overgrown of a summer without mowing, but the kind that takes years, perhaps a decade. Weeds had pushed through cracks in the front path. The paintwork on the door had long since blistered and peeled back to bare wood. "Place looks long empty," Davidson said. Priya looked at her screen. The child's line was still open, still breathing. "There was a call from inside," she said. "Welfare check. Please proceed." She heard their footsteps through Davidson's radio, the sound of a gate, the path, a knock on the door, loud, professional. "Police. Anyone inside?" Nothing. They went in through the front. The door, Davidson reported, was unlocked. Not forced, not broken, just unlocked, as if whoever had last left had simply not bothered to close it properly, as if they had not expected to need to. Priya heard them move through the house. She heard their torches clicking on. She heard the particular kind of quiet that comes from a space that has not been occupied for a very long time. The dusty, sealed quality of rooms that have forgotten what it is to be walked through. "Ground floor clear," Reyes said. "Upper floor clear. No one here, Priya. Not a soul." The child's line was still open. Priya looked at the number on her screen and, without fully knowing why, ran it through the system while the officers were still inside. The result came back quickly. The number had been registered to that address. Residential account. Last active billing, March 2003. Service disconnected. Same month. The account had not been reopened. There was no record of it being transferred. The line, according to every system available to her, had not existed for over 2 decades. Priya sat very still for a moment. The child was still breathing in her ear. She radioed Davidson. "Can you check the hallway? Ground floor. I need you to look for a telephone." There was a pause. The pause of a professional who has learned not to ask unnecessary questions at 4:20 in the morning. "Checking," Davidson said. Priya heard his footsteps, heard him slow, heard the quality of his silence change, the way a person's silence changes when they have seen something they did not expect. "There's a phone," he said, "on the floor, in the hallway. Off the hook." Priya's pen stopped clicking. What kind of phone? A pause. She could hear him crouching. The soft shift of his jacket. The change in the acoustic as he got closer to the floor. Old, landline, cream-colored, cord phone. You know, the kind with the coiled cable. It's... He paused again. "It's not plugged in. The wall socket, there's nothing in it. The cable's just lying there on the floor." The child's line was still open, still breathing. "Pick up the receiver," Priya said. There was a long moment. She heard the soft sound of plastic against palm. She heard Davidson bring the receiver to his ear, and then she heard, through his radio, thin and distant but unmistakable, the same sound that was already in her other ear. A child's voice. Flat. Exhausted. They're in the house. It was 4:23 a.m. Davidson reported that the phone was a model he did not recognize. Priya looked it up from the description he gave. The make and model had been manufactured between 1985 and 1989. Last produced over 35 years ago. A domestic telephone. The kind that sat on a hallway table in a house that had a hallway table. Beside a notepad and a pen for messages. Beside a bowl for keys. The kind of phone that a child might use. Standing on tiptoe in a hallway. To call for help. None of this made sense. Priya knew it did not make sense. She had spent 11 years in a role that required her to hold the world in its categories. Emergency and non-emergency. Real and mistaken. Explainable and not yet explained. She was good at her job precisely because she did not panic. She did not fill gaps with fear. She waited for information, and she acted on what she had. What she had, at 4:25 a.m., was this. A disconnected number that had placed a call, an unoccupied house that had been empty for years, a telephone that was not connected to anything, and a child's voice that had not stopped speaking for 15 minutes. She pulled up the address history, the property records. She moved through databases the way she moved through the hours of a long shift. Methodically, without rushing. The house had last been occupied in 2003. A family. A mother, a father, and a daughter. The daughter had been 8 years old. There had been an incident. The records were thin, heavily summarized, the kind of thinness that comes from files that have been looked at and then put away. She did not read all of it. She read enough. The family had left the house in the spring of 2003. Only 2 of them had left. At 4:31 a.m., Priya asked Davidson to describe what he could see in the hallway. He described a floor bare of everything except dust and the telephone. He described walls with faded rectangles where pictures had hung. He described a staircase with a banister that had worked loose from its mooring. He described the smell, that particular smell of a house that has been closed up for a long time. A smell like old paper and something else beneath it, something mineral and cold. He described a small shoe, child's shoe, near the bottom of the stairs. A single shoe, its partner absent, sitting on its side the way shoes do when someone has kicked them off quickly, not meaning to lose them. Priya did not say anything for a moment. In her left ear, Davidson, standing in a dark hallway, 23 years of dust on every surface, a telephone in his hand that was connected to nothing. In her right ear, a child's voice, still speaking, still carrying the same flat, worn weight it had carried since 4:10. They're in the house. Priya looked at her screen. She looked at the number. She looked at the timestamp on the call, 4:10:07 a.m., and the counter beside it, still running, still counting. She thought about what it means for a line to be disconnected. She thought about what it means for a voice to still be there, on the other end of a line that does not exist, in a house that has been empty since the spring of the year. A child did not come home. She thought about what the child might be waiting for, whether anyone had ever come. It is now 4:45 a.m. The voice has not stopped. Davidson is still in the hallway. He has put the receiver back on the floor because he said he needed to put it down. He just needed to put it down for a moment. But even from where he is standing, he can hear it. Thin and small and patient, rising from the plastic that is not connected to anything, in a house that has been dark for longer than some of his colleagues have been alive. Priya is still at her console. The blue light of her monitors, the hum of the ceiling panels, the coffee machine clicking somewhere behind her. The counter beside the call is still running. She has not ended the call. She doesn't know if she can. She doesn't know if ending the call means the voice stops, or simply means she can no longer hear it. She doesn't know if that would be better or worse. She is still at her console, because that is what she does. She sits and she listens, and she holds the line. She has been doing it for 11 years. She knows how to stay present when everything around her is asking her not to, but she has stopped clicking her pen. And somewhere in the back of her mind, beneath the training, beneath the protocol, beneath the careful machinery of a person who knows how to stay calm, something very quiet is asking a question she doesn't have an answer to. What do you do when someone has been calling for help for 20 years and no one came, and they are still on the line? The counter ticks. The voice continues. The house is dark, and the phone is not connected to anything, and the child keeps saying the same 4 words over and over in the same flat and exhausted tone. Priya sits with the silence of 4:45 in the morning and listens. Thank you for listening to Stillwater Chronicles, where even the quietest calls carry the longest stories. If this stillness stayed with you, if the sound of that voice settled somewhere deep, then let it remain a little while longer. Some lines, after all, were never truly disconnected. They were only waiting for someone to finally pick up. Rest now, the line will keep.